My name is Maya Prescott, and I'm 29 years old. 2 years ago, my parents told me I was no longer welcome in their home. My father said it quietly, the way he said everything important, looking at the wall instead of at me, his voice flat and final. My mother didn't say anything at all. She just handed me my coat. It was November in Louisville. 31 degrees outside. I was 4 months pregnant. What none of us knew yet was that the man who had abandoned me, the man whose family had quietly paid my parents to look away, would come back 2 years later, demanding rights to a daughter he had never once called by name. And when he did, the only person standing between him and my little girl was my 24-year-old brother, Theo, who slept on a pull-out couch in a studio apartment, worked 2 jobs, and had been written off by our entire family as the one who never amounted to anything. This is the story of how I lost everything and learned, slowly and painfully, what it actually means to belong to someone. It started 20 months before that November night. March, the year I turned 28. I was working as a physical therapist assistant at a sports rehabilitation clinic in Louisville. Not glamorous work, but I was good at it. I had student loans, $412 a month, and a car that needed new brakes, and I was proud anyway. I'd built something real. I met Dominic Callahan at a continuing education conference downtown. He was 33, tall, the kind of man who wore his suit like it had been made specifically for his shoulders. His father ran one of the largest real estate law firms in Jefferson County, old Louisville money, the kind that gets buildings named after it. He asked for my number in the hotel lobby. I almost said no. I didn't, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. We dated for 16 months. He took me to restaurants where the menu had no prices on the woman's copy. He sent flowers to my office twice. He remembered that I took my coffee with oat milk, not dairy, and he always ordered it that way before I arrived. I felt chosen. I felt like someone had looked at everything I was, the student loans, the $12 lunch breaks, the 2012 Honda with the check engine light, and said, "You're enough anyway." He never took me to his family's house. His parents were private, he said. Old-fashioned. They needed time. 14 months in, I stopped accepting that answer. He kissed the top of my head and said, "Soon." I told myself I believed him, but I'd grown up in a church community in the East End, where what people thought of you was currency, and I knew, somewhere I didn't want to look directly at, that private and secret were different words. I found out I was pregnant on a Wednesday in July. 10 weeks along. I sat in the bathroom of my apartment with the test in my hand for a long time. My first thought, if I'm being honest, was not fear, it was relief. Because I thought this would be the thing that made him bring me in from the outside. This would be the reason. I called him from the parking lot of a Walgreens. "I need to talk to you. Can I come over?" He came to me instead, which I should have recognized for what it was. He sat in my living room and I told him. He looked at me for a moment the way you look at a bill you weren't expecting. Then he said he needed a few days. Not "we'll figure this out." Not "I love you." "We'll handle it together." Just he needed time. He needed 12 days. On the 13th day, his mother called me. Not him. His mother, Diane. She had the kind of voice that sounded like it had never been raised in her life, smooth and absolutely certain of itself. She told me that Dominic was a young man with a future, that I seemed like a smart girl, that smart girls understood how the world worked. There was a number, she said. A generous number. There was a document. I would have security. The child would have options. I asked what kind of options, exactly, since those options would apparently not include knowing their father. She didn't answer that. The document arrived by courier 2 days later. $120,000. Non-disclosure agreement. No paternity claim. No contact with the Callahan family. I read every page. Then I put it back in the envelope, walked to the parking lot of my apartment complex, and dropped it in the dumpster. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until 2 years later in a courtroom, was that the next morning, Diane Callahan called my parents. My father, Robert, was a deacon at Grace Community Church. My mother, Patricia, ran the welcome committee. Their reputation in that community was something they had built over 30 years and polished every Sunday. And Diane Callahan, who had attended fundraisers with half the church's board, told my parents a story. She told them that their daughter had pursued her son aggressively, that their daughter had known exactly what she was doing, that their daughter had gotten pregnant on purpose to access the Callahan family's money, and that Dominic, poor Dominic, had already offered a more than fair settlement that I had refused because I wanted more. My parents believed her. I didn't know any of that when I sat down on their couch that November Sunday and told them I was keeping the baby. I didn't know why my father looked at me the way he did, not just disappointed, but certain, like I had confirmed something, like he'd already been briefed. My mother asked, twice, whether I had considered other options. I told her I had considered them and made my decision. My father stood up and walked to the kitchen. He came back with his hands in his pockets. "You can't stay here," he said. And then, because he was a deacon and believed in being precise, "This isn't the kind of thing we can stand behind, Maya. You understand." I understood that they were handing me my coat. I sat in my car in their driveway for 20 minutes. I had $940 in my checking account, a car that needed brakes, student loans that wouldn't pause for a pregnancy, and a baby due in 5 months. I called Theo. My brother was 24. He had enrolled at the University of Kentucky on a partial scholarship 3 years earlier and dropped out 18 months later when our grandmother got sick and no one else in the family would go to Lexington to take care of her. My parents called it a waste. They called it typical, my father said, with the particular sadness of a man who had already given up on someone, that Theo had always chosen the hard way for no good reason. Theo had moved back to Louisville after our grandmother passed. He had a studio apartment in Shively, 12 minutes from my parents' house. He worked days at a hardware store and 3 nights a week doing security at a parking structure downtown. He drove a 2008 Silverado with rust along the wheel wells. He had never once complained to me about any of it. The phone rang twice. "Hey," he said. I couldn't talk for a moment. "Maya, what happened?" I told him. All of it. The pregnancy, Dominic, the NDA I'd thrown away, Mom and Dad, the coat, the driveway. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Where are you right now?" "Their driveway." "Come here," he said. And that was it. His apartment was 460 square feet. One room that served as living room, bedroom, and kitchen. A bathroom that fit one person at a time if they stood close to the sink. He had a pull-out couch that he never pulled out, just slept on it folded, because he said it was more comfortable anyway. I knew that wasn't true. I also knew he would never admit it. He made me eggs. He didn't ask whether I was hungry. He just made them, put the plate in front of me, and sat across from me with a glass of water and waited. "You don't have to do this," I said. He looked at me the way he used to when we were kids, and I said something he thought was stupid. "You're my sister," he said. "Eat." I moved in that night. I went back to work 3 days later because I had to. I had a deductible I hadn't met, prenatal appointments at $140 each after insurance, and a prescription for prenatal vitamins that the pharmacy told me cheerfully would be $62 out of pocket. I worked 4 days a week. I cried in the parking lot twice a week, on a schedule, almost, because there wasn't time to cry anywhere else. Theo started picking up a 4th night at the parking structure. I didn't find out until I heard him come in at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, and realized his truck had been gone when I got up at midnight to use the bathroom. "Theo, you're working 4 nights now?" He shrugged. "Hours were available. You don't have to do this." He looked at me the same way as before. "Stop saying that," he said. He started cooking more too. Not elaborate things, rice and beans, pasta with jarred sauce, scrambled eggs with whatever vegetables were marked down at the grocery store. He bought food in bulk when he could, store brands only. I found a grocery list once on the kitchen counter. Chicken thighs, not breasts. Store brand cereal, no-name yogurt. I saw that he had crossed off orange juice, then written it back in, then crossed it out again. I didn't say anything. I just added it to the list the next time I went. He said nothing about it when he unpacked the bags. Lily was born on February 8th. 14 hours of labor. Theo was in the waiting room the entire time, refusing to leave, eating nothing, sending me updates on his phone that I couldn't respond to because I was busy trying not to die. When they let him in afterward, he stood in the doorway of the recovery room, looking like he hadn't slept, which he hadn't, and looked at the bundle in my arms and said, quietly, "Is she okay?" "She's perfect," I said. He came to the side of the bed and looked at her for a long moment. She had dark hair, a lot of it, and she was squinting at the light in the way newborns do, annoyed at the world for being so bright. Theo held out one finger, and she wrapped her hand around it automatically. That reflex that babies have. And he made a sound in the back of his throat that I had never heard from him before. "You want to hold her?" He nodded. Couldn't speak. I handed her to him. His hands shook. He held her like she was something he was afraid of breaking. And then she settled against his chest, and he went completely still. And I watched my 24-year-old brother, who our parents called the dropout and the disappointment, fall entirely in love with my daughter. "Hey, Lily," he whispered. "I've got you." The first 4 months were the hardest. I had 12 weeks of unpaid leave under FMLA and approximately $600 in savings, which lasted 3 weeks. Theo's take-home from the hardware store and the parking structure together was about $2,800 a month on a good month. Rent was $540. Utilities ran another $130. My student loans were $412. Car insurance for both of us, combined, was $160. Diapers ran close to $80 a month if we bought generic. Formula, I tried to breastfeed, struggled, supplemented, was $52 a container. We made it work the way people make things work when they don't have a choice. Generic everything. Lights off in rooms we weren't using. Theo brown-bagged every single meal, peanut butter on wheat bread every day for 3 months. I watched him get thinner. The shadows under his eyes got darker. He had always been lean, but now he looked hollowed out in a way that scared me. "You need to eat more," I told him one night. "I eat plenty," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Theo." He looked up. He looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than tired. "I'm okay, Maya. I need you to let me be okay." I didn't push it, but I started making sure there was always something extra on his plate at dinner. Lily was 7 months old when her fever hit 104 and wouldn't come down. I took her to urgent care at midnight on a Thursday. Theo drove because my hands were shaking too badly. We sat in that waiting room under fluorescent lights while Lily cried against my shoulder. And Theo sat next to me with his knee bouncing, watching the door. The doctor said it was bacterial, prescribed an antibiotic. At the pharmacy counter, the woman told me that my insurance deductible had reset in January, and the antibiotic was $208 out of pocket. I stared at her. $208. I had $63 in my account. I started to explain. I started to say I don't know what I was going to say. That my baby had a fever of 104 and I needed her to have this medication, and I could pay next week, half now, something. The words got stuck somewhere in my chest. Theo stepped up beside me. He set down a stack of bills on the counter. He had clearly stopped at the ATM between the urgent care and the pharmacy without telling me. "She said 208, he said. I looked at him. "Theo, where?" He didn't look at me. He counted out the rest in 5s and 10s from his wallet. "I'll pay you back," I said in the car. He kept his eyes on the road. "Don't. Where did you get that?" Quiet for a moment. Then, I cashed in the coin jar. "You've been saving those for 2 years. That was almost $300. He shrugged. "Lily's asleep. That's what matters." He said, Lily needed the medicine. That's it. Like it was the simplest sentence in the world. Lily's first birthday was February 8th. We couldn't afford a party, so it was just the 2 of us in the apartment. Theo made a cake from a box mix, yellow with white frosting, and spelled her name out in candy letters that were slightly uneven. He stuck 1 candle in it, and we sang to her, badly, while she sat in her high chair and slapped both hands on the tray, laughing at us. I have a video on my phone of that exact moment. I have watched it 400 times. I watch it when I need to remember what the word enough actually means. We didn't have a table big enough for guests. We didn't have guests to invite. But Lily was healthy and happy and laughing at the sound of our voices, and Theo was grinning like an idiot with frosting on his thumb, and I thought, this is a family. Not the one I planned, the one that stayed. Dominic came back when Lily was 14 months old. I saw him in the parking lot of the grocery store on a Saturday morning. He was loading bags into an SUV that was newer than my apartment. He turned and saw me at the same moment, and his eyes dropped immediately to Lily in the cart beside me. She had his coloring. I had noticed it as she got older, the lighter brown of her eyes, the angle of her jaw. In pictures, if you didn't know, you might not see it. In person, standing 10 feet away, it was plain. "Dominic?" I said. He said my name. His face did something complicated. I put my hand on Lily's cart. "Don't," I said. "I just want to talk. Please. 5 minutes." I should have kept walking. I didn't. Because I was curious in the way you're curious about a scar you already know it's going to hurt to touch it, and you touch it anyway. I told him Starbucks. Saturday, 9 a.m. He had until I finished my coffee. He was there when I arrived, already seated, a coffee in front of the chair across from him. He stood when I walked in. I sat without acknowledging it. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what, specifically?" "For everything. Not for the way I handled it. I was a coward. I know that." "What changed?" He exhaled. "My father passed away in September. He left a will." There it was. "What kind of will?" I said. "One with conditions. I have to demonstrate financial responsibility for any biological children I have. Paternity established, support documented, the whole thing." He paused. "Otherwise, the estate goes entirely to charity." "How much?" He looked at the table. 7 million, plus the property holdings. I stood up. He said, "Maya, wait, it's not just that." "No," I said. "She has a name. Her name is Lily. You have never said it. Not once since she was born. Not once in this conversation. You want $7 million, and you don't even know your daughter's name. That's what this is." "I know her name." "Then say it." He opened his mouth. Closed it. I left. I called a legal aid organization the following Monday. They connected me with a pro bono attorney named Patricia Walsh, 41 years old. Steel gray blazer. The kind of person who listened without writing anything down and remembered every word anyway. "They're going to argue stability," she said. "They'll point to the apartment, your brother's employment, his education level. They'll make it about resources. I don't have resources. You have something better," she said. "You have a record, 2 years of showing up. That matters in a Kentucky courtroom, especially in front of the right judge." We drew Judge Sandra Okafor, 52 years old. I looked her up afterward. She had put herself through law school, working nights at a hospital. She had 2 kids she'd raised mostly alone after a divorce. I don't know what Judge Okafor thought when she looked at me across that courtroom, but I know she listened like she was actually trying to understand something. Dominic's attorney was a man in a suit that cost more than my monthly take-home. He used phrases like financial portfolio and educational opportunities and enriched environment. He said Dominic was a changed man. He said the past was the past. Judge Okafor looked at him over her reading glasses. "Where was Mr. Callahan when this child was hospitalized at 7 months of age?" "Counsel. He wasn't. At that time he wasn't aware. He had no contact at all for 14 months. Is that right?" "That's correct. But, by choice." A pause. "By choice," the attorney admitted. Judge Okafor wrote something down and didn't look up. It was on the 4th day of the trial that everything shifted. Patricia had subpoenaed the Callahan family's communications with my parents. She had suspected, based on something my mother had said during a deposition, something small, a slip, a reference to being told by the Callahan family that I had refused reasonable support, that there was more to how my parents had responded than I knew. The emails were 43 pages long. Diane Callahan had sent my mother a detailed account of events that bore almost no relationship to what had actually happened. She told my mother I had solicited an ongoing relationship with Dominic, knowing he was seeing someone else. She told my mother I had refused a settlement of $300,000. $300,000, not $120, because I wanted to go public and damage the family's reputation. She told my mother that I had told Dominic, directly, that I didn't want him involved in the child's life. Every sentence was a lie. Every single one. Patricia read 3 of the emails aloud in court. She read them slowly. Judge Okafor listened without moving. In the gallery behind me, I heard my mother make a sound. I didn't turn around. It was the first day of the trial that my parents had shown up. I hadn't known they were coming. I had arrived early and found them already seated 3 rows back, my father in his good gray suit, my mother with her hands folded in her lap. We didn't speak. I sat at the plaintiff's table and stared at the wall and told myself I didn't care why they were there. But when Patricia read those emails, I heard my mother make that sound, something between a breath and a word that didn't make it out, and I felt something move in my chest that I wasn't ready for. At the recess, my father came to stand beside me in the hallway. He didn't touch me. He looked at the floor. "We didn't know," he said. "I know. Maya. He stopped. Started again. "She said you had turned down $300,000. She said you wanted to destroy them. She said," "I know what she said, Dad. I read the emails. We thought we were." He rubbed the back of his neck, and I saw for the first time how old he looked. How much older than I remembered. "Your mother thought she was protecting you from a situation that she thought that we both thought." "You closed the door," I said. "It was November. I was 4 months pregnant. You closed the door." He didn't answer. There wasn't an answer. I walked back to the plaintiff's table. Theo had been with Lily during the trial, taking time off from the hardware store at a cost I didn't want to calculate. On day 5, Patricia called him as a witness. He sat in the stand in the only dress shirt he owned, a blue button-down with a small fraying at the left cuff, and answered every question directly and without drama. He described the studio apartment, the pull-out couch, the budget. He described the night Lily's fever hit 104. He described teaching himself, from YouTube videos, how to install the crib correctly because neither of us could afford to pay someone to do it. He described the 2 jobs. He described Lily's first word, which had been his name, not Mama, not Dada, just Theo, which she pronounced T. Arms up, reaching. Dominic's attorney cross-examined him about his education, about his income, about his living situation. "Do you think a studio apartment is an appropriate long-term environment for a child?" Theo looked at him. "We've been looking at 2 bedrooms since October. We've been approved for one on Burnett Avenue. We move in next month." That was the first I'd heard of it. I stared at the back of his head. Patricia didn't look surprised. I realized later she'd known. The verdict came on day 7. Judge Okafor reviewed both parties' submissions, thanked counsel on both sides, and looked down at her notes for a moment before she spoke. "This court recognizes that Mr. Callahan's interest in his daughter may be sincere," she said. "However, sincerity does not retroactively create a relationship that was absent for 14 months by deliberate choice. Miss Prescott has provided consistent, documented, loving care for this child under significant financial hardship. The court finds no evidence of an unsafe or unstable environment. Full custody is awarded to Miss Prescott. Child support is set at $1,400 per month. Mr. Callahan will have supervised visitation, 2 hours per week, with review in 6 months contingent on consistent attendance. Additionally, the court finds sufficient basis to award retroactive support for the 14 months preceding this filing. Mr. Callahan will remit a lump sum of $19,600 within 60 days. Dominic sat expressionless. His mother, 2 rows behind him, looked like she had swallowed something unpleasant. Patricia squeezed my arm. "You won!" I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt like I'd been wrung out and hung up to dry, and I just wanted to go home and hold my daughter. 2 weeks after the verdict, my father showed up at the apartment on a Saturday morning with a toolbox and no phone call ahead of time. I opened the door, and he was standing on the landing in his work clothes. "The bathroom faucet's been dripping," I said, because it had been, and I didn't know what else to say. "I know," he said. "Theo mentioned it. He worked for 3 hours. He fixed the faucet. He fixed the kitchen cabinet that wouldn't close flush. He replaced the weather stripping on the front door that had been letting cold air in all winter. He worked in silence, and I brought him coffee, and neither of us brought up November or the emails or the 3 years that had passed or any of it. When he was packing up his tools, Lily toddled over and stood looking up at him with the full solemn attention of a 1-year-old encountering something unfamiliar. "Hi," my father said. He crouched down to her level. His voice was different from how it usually sounded. Softer. "Hi there, Lily." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up a block from the floor and held it out to him. He took it. He looked at it in his palm, this small red plastic cube, and I watched something cross his face that I had never seen there before. Not the deacon face, not the disappointed father face, just a man looking at his granddaughter's block and understanding for the first time what he had missed. "Thank you," he said to her, very seriously. She turned and toddled away to find another block. He stood up slowly. He didn't hug me. I didn't hug him. But when he got to the door, he stopped with his hand on the frame and said, without turning around, "I'd like to come back. If you'd allow that." My throat tightened. "That's a start," I said. He nodded and left. My mother called the following Tuesday. The conversation lasted 22 minutes and covered nothing and everything, and we both cried once without acknowledging it. She asked if she could bring dinner on Friday. I said yes. She brought a casserole and a stuffed rabbit for Lily, and she sat on the floor with her while Theo and I ate, and I watched her make funny voices with the rabbit, and I thought, she is in there somewhere. She was always in there. She just let someone else tell her what to see. Forgiving someone is not the same as forgetting what they did. I want to be clear about that, because I used to think they were the same thing, and they're not. Forgiveness is a decision you make over and over again, some days easier than others. Some days I would drive past my parents' street and feel nothing. Some days I would see a woman in a grocery store carrying a baby and feel the particular cold of that November night, like it was happening again, and I would have to stand in the cereal aisle and breathe through it. But they show up now. That's what I know. They show up. Dominic's first supervised visit was at a community center near our apartment. He arrived 5 minutes early, which surprised me. He had not brought bags of expensive toys. He had brought one book, a board book, about a bear who goes looking for honey, and a small stuffed elephant. He handed them to me at the door rather than trying to give them directly to Lily, which I thought showed some degree of understanding. Lily stood behind my legs and looked at him. She did this with every new person. "Hi, Lily," he said. He didn't try too hard. He just sat down on the floor of the community center's play area and opened the bear book and started reading it aloud, to no one in particular, without asking her to come closer. She watched him for 4 minutes. I timed it on my phone. Then she walked over, sat down 3 feet from him, and listened to the rest of the book. "It's a start," Patricia told me when I described it. It's a long way from being her father. But it's a start. The word start had started to feel important to me. Everything was a start. My father with his toolbox, my mother with her casserole, Dominic on the floor with a book he'd bought because it was about something gentle and hopeful. None of them had earned what they'd lost. None of them could earn it back, not really. But they could start. And I got to decide whether that was enough. Some days I decided yes. Some days I needed until morning to get there. Lily turned 2 in February. We had the party at the new apartment Burnett Avenue, 2 bedrooms. Lily's room painted yellow, because she had pointed at the yellow paint chip at the hardware store and said mine with absolute certainty. Theo's room had a real bed in it. This felt like an extravagance, and also like the bare minimum of what he deserved. My parents came. Theo's friend Marcus came with his kids. Patricia Walsh came, which surprised me, but she said she had a 2-year-old niece and needed an excuse to eat cake. It was loud and small and imperfect, and Lily ran between everyone's legs, screaming with joy at the specific chaos of having all her people in one room. We sang Happy Birthday badly. Lily blew out the candles on the second try and looked stunned and proud in equal measure. "What did you wish for?" Theo asked her. She looked at him with complete seriousness. "A dog," she said. He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long time. After everyone had gone home, and Lily was asleep with her stuffed elephant and her new birthday rabbit, I sat on the couch while Theo washed the dishes. I could hear the water running, the sound of plates. Outside, a car passed slowly down Burnett Avenue, headlights sweeping across the ceiling. I thought about that November night, the coat in my mother's hands, the cold coming through the open door. I thought about Theo's pull-out couch and the coin jar, and $208 laid on a pharmacy counter at midnight, without hesitation. I thought about a 24-year-old man who had never been called the right things by the right people, teaching himself from YouTube how to build a crib, and standing in a courtroom in his only dress shirt and saying without drama or bitterness, "We've been approved for a 2-bedroom. We move in next month." As if it was never a question. As if where she goes, I go is just a fact. Like weather, like gravity. Theo came out of the kitchen drying his hands. He looked at me on the couch and then at Lily's closed door. "She out?" he asked. "Sound asleep." He sat down next to me. We didn't speak for a while. "Thank you," I said. He looked at me sideways. "Don't start. I'm serious." "I know you are." He looked at the ceiling. "You would have done the same." I thought about that. I hoped it was true. I believed it was true. But the honest answer was that I had never been tested the way he was tested, had never been asked to open a door at midnight and make room for someone else's life inside my own small one. I hoped I would have said, "Come on," the way he had. I hoped I would have made the eggs without asking. "Maybe," I said. He nudged my shoulder with his. "Definitely." I nudged him back. We sat there while the apartment settled into quiet, and I listened to Lily breathing on the monitor, small and steady and safe, and I thought about what family had meant to me before all of this. Blood. Last names. The people in the pew beside you on Sunday. I thought I knew what it meant. I thought it was given to you. I was wrong. Family is the person who answers the phone at 11 o'clock at night when your voice is already broken. It's the person who makes eggs and doesn't explain why. It's the person who goes to a pharmacy counter with a stack of bills and doesn't ask to be thanked and doesn't keep a ledger of what's owed. It's the person who sits on the floor of a community center and reads a book about a bear, not because they have to, but because they're trying. Slowly, imperfectly, with no guarantee that you'll let them keep trying. Family is anyone who stays. I used to think I needed my parents to stay for it to count. I used to think their leaving had broken something in me that was supposed to be permanent. I was wrong about that, too. It cracked something open. And what grew in there afterward? Lily, Theo, the yellow bedroom, the birthday cake, the plate of eggs at midnight. None of that would exist if the door hadn't closed first. I'm not grateful for the night they handed me my coat. I never will be. But I'm grateful for what I found when I had to find it on my own. Lily stirred on the monitor. A small sound, a sigh, settling deeper into sleep. Theo glanced at it, then looked back at the wall. "Good kid?" he said. "The best," I said. Outside, another car passed. The light moved across the ceiling and was gone. And I thought, sitting there in the quiet, with my brother who was never the disappointment they said he was, and my daughter sleeping 10 feet away, I thought, this is enough. This loud, small, imperfect life is mine. And I built it from the ground up, with my own hands, in the cold, starting from nothing. And I wouldn't change a single hard thing about it.